Welcome to the Political Maverick, the podcast that keeps you informed, engaged, and entertained on all things current events. Let's dive in.
It's going to require a Latino politician who gives voice to the Latino community first, isn't trying to climb the Republican or Democratic hierarchy in the Republican Democratic ladders. That's going to happen. Let them both do that. But Latinos are, more than any group I have ever seen in my many years of looking at this, Latinos are rejecting both parties. It's benefiting the Republican Party right now because they have nowhere to go but up.
Right.
And Democrats have nowhere to go but down. So we're seeing that it's looking like there's this massive pro-Republicanism. And the truth is there's very, very, very little data, very little polling. In fact, I haven't really seen any. And I look at this shit all day. So if you got to beep that out, you can beep that out.
No. I think the more the better. The reality is reality.
I look at Latino polling all the time. There is almost no evidence suggesting Latinos are becoming more conservative or more Republican. There's overwhelming evidence, overwhelming data to show that we are becoming more populist and rejecting both parties. And that's what's happening. And so when a Latino politician taps into that, I think you're going to see Latinos respond. That's why the subtitle of my book is How Latinos Are Transforming Democracy. That's what I'm talking about. The book is a critique. It goes into a criticism of both parties, what they're doing wrong, but also what they're doing right, because each party is also doing something right. And whichever party can figure that out will be the beneficiary, and I'm arguing will be the dominant party of the next generation. What I don't want to do is I don't want Latino politicians to be let off the hook, to just start saying, see, the Republicans were right. See, the Democrats were right. It's like, shame on both of you. Right. And shame on us if we allow that to happen. If people start advocating for the community, if they start advocating for blue-collar workers, if they start arguing and protecting and advocating for the least among us, the parties will come to us.
What do you see the future with Latinos in leadership, both in business and government, especially your organization, which is both, in the next few years?
So a couple of things is maybe in a couple of different levels here, but in terms of the Latino leadership, we need to train more Latinos to be community leaders, to be the next Mary Anne's, to be the next, CEOs of nonprofits. We don't have a lot of people really considering being in nonprofits. So that's an area where we kind of need to work on. So because nonprofits in this country, in Washington, D.C., play a big role. In other countries, nonprofits maybe aren't as engaged.
Right.
But in Washington, D.C., you really have the nonprofits, the government, and the private sector. And the three work together. And so it's really important that we do a little bit more training on the nonprofit side. It could be, at think tanks or different things like that as well. On the Hill side, in Congress, it's nice to see more Hispanics on the Republican side coming in. We have a lot of Hispanics on the Democrat side, but we also don't have a good mix regionally. So we need more Latinos, Hispanics from different parts of the country running for Congress and getting more involved on either side of the aisle. And then on the business side, we don't have as many Latinos. We have a number of Latinos working in the private sector and government relations, but they're not the heads of the office. They're not in charge of the office.
And we just talked about this. So, we were just talking about this last month in D.C. about, with my firm doing local, state, and federal, and the only Republican Latino-owned firm in Washington, D.C., which just blew my mind, that's Latino-owned. And so, Rojas Public Affairs, I'm like, how is that? As we're going through names, they're from larger firms versus the Latino-owned firm, which blew my mind. And I think one of the main things, if we can finish off with this, is you lead by example. Chile leads by example. How do you customize those incidences in crises, both with your team internally as well as other local government agencies, state and federal. Not only, to let people know, you're not only dealing with your community, you're dealing with a variety of different communities, and then an upward level of the state and a further up with the federal. So how does that communication work in pre-planning and when it does actually happen?
And you're right. It's specific to this event. It wasn't a Sierra Madre event. It was a local event, a Los Angeles County event. And so you're now even bringing in state resources, federal, not just the local and the county, but that became typically if it was just a Sierra Madre event, we would have been able to reach out to other agencies, but we were all strapped because all the agencies were being allocated to all the different emergencies. I think the takeaways that I had from when I managed the Bobcat Fire communications and when I managed the windstorm communications of 2011, really you're collaborating with your neighboring partners. In our case, it was Los Angeles County, the Department of Forestry, and our local cities, Arcadia and Mount Monrovia, to make sure our joint information centers are providing the same information so that all of our community is getting consistent information. And that's crucial because the last thing you want to do is put out information and then someone comes back and says, well, I'm confused because the city 6 blocks down is putting out different information that contradicts what you're doing. So those are the takeaways that I took from the 2011 windstorm incident, the 2020 Bobcat Fire that burned close here also, is to work and collaborate with the joint information centers, the JICs, to get that information out, that it's consistent and we're all putting out the same information out.
We're seeing catastrophe hit again in California with the fires. And we know that's going to be a lot more devastation, a lot more impact to the community economically, psychologically. And we're already seeing problems in regards to, engagement within the community, response to the community, crisis communications, next steps. What do you think are some of the lessons learned that other communities need to see and prepare prior to something maybe happening in their own communities?
I think first is be prepared to have oversight, right? Who will that be? Do you create a czar? Who's your point person, right? And then, it's like anything, who are community organizations that we go to, who are foundations, because you're going to need money. Who are those foundations, corporations? And I think you have to ask those questions now way before the disaster, right? You have that list. You're just like...
It's part of the preparation. Absolutely.
Yeah, what I tell folks, you live in your home, you should have water, Band-Aids, whatever it may be, right? Well, do counties have their safety kit ready to go? And I think that's on a policy side, I would really push cities, counties to say, do you have your kit ready to go? Your list, your go-to, utility. Who are all the folks you're going to bring together? Where will you meet at? What were those meetings? Because we had issues in just approving disaster centers that were in jurisdictions to say yes, that everyone could use it as a disaster center. Because folks are coming needing clothes, food, etc.
Yeah.
At one point, we had to just get sandbags out.
Right. I mean, from setting up a plan of action in these crises, but there needs to be some practice prior to that. I mean, year round, where the community understands what the government gibberish and talk is. People know where to go. What does, signs of like green, yellow, and red, if you need to evacuate, you evacuate now. Thanks for tuning in to the Political Maverick. Follow us on TikTok, Instagram, YouTube, and X for updates. Catch every episode on YouTube, Spotify, Apple, and Amazon. See you next time.